All right, so we have our piece here. First thing we're going to do is fold it over, okay? So you're folding it over, right sides together. Now, when you're sewing, a couple of things. Before you even start, you want to wash and dry your fabric 2 to 3 times. You want to get all of the amount of shrinkage that might happen out of it. So wash and dry your fabric at least 2 times, preferably 3 times. Now, when you're sewing, you should also be sewing with a stitch length of about 10 to 12 stitches per inch. We want to keep these nice and strong, again, because they're going to be laundered a lot. So we want to make sure they hold up in the wear and tear and the laundering. So you want to have about 10 to 12 stitches per inch. When you turn your sewing machine on, it generally defaults to a 2.0 or 2.5 stitch. That should work just fine, but you want to check that too. Don't have big basting stitches in there. We want these to hold together. All right, so first stitching line you're going to do 1/4 inch after you have folded the piece in half. Now we have correct sides together. That's the correct side of the fabric, wrong side of the fabric. Correct sides of the fabric together, we're going to sew at 1/4 inch. So before you begin, check and make sure that you have that 1/4 inch seam allowance marked on your sewing machine if you're not familiar with your sewing machine. All right, so I've already done that. And I'm going to sew this 1/4 inch seam. Now, you want to keep this nice and strong. So you want to back tack, go back and forth about 3 stitches at the beginning and end of each seam, okay? And we're just sewing across here. All right, so there's our 1/4 inch seam. Now we want to press this. So we're going to press this seam, just press it to one side, and then we're going to turn this out. All right, so we're turning to the correct side. All right, then here's our seam. Make sure that seam is at the bottom. And I would give it another quick press just to make sure that seam stays at the bottom, and we're going to flatten this out. All right, so we have this. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is sew 1/4 inch down each side. I want this to act as one unit when I'm pleating it. So if I don't secure those 2 edges together, they might act a little independent of one another. So again, just 1/4 inch right down the side. Okay, 1/4 inch down the other side. Now this is acting as one unit. Okay. All right. Next thing, we're going to start pleating. Now, on your pattern, you have some notches, which are kind of a way to communicate, to know where to bring the pleat lines down to. So let's take a look at our piece. We want the fold line up here. And I'm going to mark, this is our small size mask, so I'm going to make a little pencil mark at 1.5, again at 1.5 inches each side, okay? So these are notches, just a way to communicate to yourself where you need to fold to. Here and here. That was at 1 inch, and then 1.5 inches again. So again, these notches, 1.5, 1.5, 1 inch, and then 1.5. Okay, a little bit different. This is written in the instructions, so certainly download those. You'll have some prompts in there as well. Okay, so I have this marked, and sometimes it is helpful just to clip the fabric. In fact, when you downloaded the pattern, you might have clipped your notches, which is absolutely fine. That works great. Okay, so these little clips right here, they just alert you to where you need to bring the fabric down to, or it alerts you to your next step. Okay, so our next step, again, this is the fold, this is the seam. we're gonna bring this down. So see how I'm pulling it taut here at the top notch? So the top notch is brought to, the first notch is brought to the second notch. And then I am going to pin and pin. Okay. Then I'm gonna pull that third notch taut, bring it down to the fourth notch like this. See, we're creating pleats here. Okay, now we're gonna put a pin in here and a pin right here. I'm gonna go back to the sewing machine and I'm gonna sew these down just here and here. I just wanna hold those pleats down so when I'm sewing or working on another step, I don't need to be mindful of those and keeping those together and closed. So back over here, 1/4 of an inch, and we're gonna sew this. And be mindful of that 1/4 of an inch. Okay, we don't want to make this too small. You don't need to back tack on this. We're just sewing this down to flatten it. Now, one thing, when you are working, pull those pins out of the way when you're sewing. Don't sew over pins. When you sew over pins, occasionally your sewing machine needle will hit those pins and break the needle, either the needle or the pins, and it can kind of fly up. All right, other side, just holding those pleats down. Okay. All right, so we're looking at this right now. Okay, pull those pins out. We did not sew over those. We got those out of the way. So, starting to look like a mask. All right, now our next step is to put in 2 additional pleats. So we have this, it's nice and flat right now, but you want to look at this, find the area here, there's my seam right there, and the area that's about 1 3/4, and really it almost just depends on which way you flipped your mask. But you want to look at this and find the kind of the longer section. It's longer from here to here than it is from here to here. And your pleats are up, okay? So find that longer area and we want to mark 7/8 of an inch above here. Okay, so we're gonna mark in our seam 7/8 of an inch, and that is right here. And then on this side, 7/8 of an inch here is right here. This is for our additional pleat. And make sure that they're level. So put your ruler down and make sure that those notches are level. And again, it doesn't matter if your seam is above or below. You just kind of want to look for that area where it's a little bit wider, okay? And then we're going to take this, drag this up. So that's where this pleat is, this first pleat here. I'm just dragging this all the way up to here, okay? And I'm putting in an additional pleat right here. I'm going to drag this up to here. You could clip that notch if you want. Okay. All right, so we're looking at this. Now, what this does, it allows for some cupping over the face, over the nose, and it also ends up kind of hugging the sides of the face a little bit better. All right, so you're looking at this. And again, it doesn't really matter whether you're on this side or this side, but you want to just choose your correct side, okay? And then this is going to be 7/8 of an inch above. All right, now we have this. I'm now going to secure these down on each side. So let's do that. Again, I'm sewing at 1/4. And I don't need to back tack on this because I am going to have a final stitch which sews the side panels on, and that's really going to be the stitch that holds everything together. So right now I just want kind of a temporary hold of this pleat so it doesn't move around on me. All right. Okay, so we're looking at this so far. Now the next step, you want to trim your edge here, just about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch. You want to just get that nice and straight. So you're looking at maybe an 1/8 of an inch from the stitch line or 3/16. So we're really just cleaning up all of these threads and making this nice and straight for our next step. Okay, just right here. So I have these 2 straps and we're gonna fold it in half and just clip the edge right here. okay? We want to notch this. All right, now we're going to fold this in half, our mask in half like this, just to kind of find the edge, which is really right at that pleat right there. So what we're going to do, correct sides together, we're going to sew this strip on right here, okay? So let me grab my pins. We're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch. All right, so pin this. We're just gonna sew this right here, okay? And you can do kind of production line where you do each side, the same step on each side, or you can do one and then the other, whatever you choose. All right, so we're gonna get this nice and secure. We're gonna sew this at 1/4. Don't sew over your pins. And we get to the end. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna press this. So let's move this out of the way, and we are gonna press, here's the back side of our mask. We're gonna press here. Let's start over here. We're gonna press this edge in 1/4. We're gonna press this edge in 1/4, and then we're gonna press the end in 1/4. So let me do that. Okay, so I just finished my pressing. So you can see, I press this edge in 1/4, this edge in 1/4, and the end at 1/4. Press your long edges first and then the end last. Also, we're pressing up the seam allowances from the mask up into the strap right here, okay? And this is gonna fold over. See how neat that is? Like this. Now, remember to find the front of your mask. We should have a pin in there to show the front of the mask, okay? Just like that, just so you can keep an eye on that so you know where to do your stitching. You always get a better looking stitch coming down from the needle than up from the bobbin. Okay, so we have this. Let's put a couple of pins in here. If your fabric is fairly stiff, you don't necessarily need to pin these before you sew the long part of the strap, but I would pin this area here because you really want it secure and you want to be able to sew on the correct line. You don't want that moving around, okay? So if at the very least, just pin this area, but you could probably get away without pinning the strap. Okay, so let's put this in. Again, we're gonna sew at 1/4 of an inch, and you're just enclosing this, back tack. Be nice and careful over the mask section. Be sure to pull out your pins as you go. Going over a lot of layers there where those pleats are. It's maybe a little bumpy or loud. And continue on. Okay. Okay, and then, there we go. You're gonna repeat this process on the other side, okay? Exact same thing. You don't need to watch me do that again. It's gonna come out looking like this. And then these straps wrap around the head and they tie in the back of the head to keep it nice and secure.
First they said don't buy masks, now they say wear a mask. So here's a quick guide to making your own mask at home because the government clearly doesn't have a clue and it's all on us now. Thanks to the Baltimore Aerial Surveillance Program for these overhead shots. That's some seriously dystopian shit. Cut your fabric into two 6x10 inch rectangles. Looks like 6 inches there. When you measure, imagine you're redrawing your own congressional district. Give yourself some extra room for any stupid mistakes. These things are sharp, so be careful. We've got enough tiny pricks screwing things up right now. Thread the needle like a Clinton on gay rights. Fold like Republicans on free trade, and hem right down the line like way too many votes in the Senate. Republicans, I know you guys love closing borders, so this part should really tickle your nuts. Use string fabric or elastic to make ties for your head. Politicians will need a little extra to get around that thick, empty skull. So there you have it, the Joe Biden of face masks. I don't want it. It might touch your face in a strange way. I doubt it could even do the job, but the only alternative seems dangerous and irresponsible. Yet if I even consider a third option, somehow that makes me the asshole.
Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I wanted to make some face masks with you. As of yet, we have not been told in England to wear masks out and about. And I made a few masks the other day, but they have elastic that goes behind your ears, and my ears are very sensitive and hate having things put behind them. So I thought I would make some with ties today, and hopefully you guys can follow this along and make one of your own if you want to. I'm possibly thinking about making a few more and just selling a few in case you guys want one and you're really struggling to get hold of a mask. These are not surgical masks, so they won't prevent you from catching COVID, but if you can't get hold of a surgical mask, then this is kind of at least something. And because the virus has a 2-week incubation period, you may not know that you have it, and you might still be going out and obviously breathing on everyone and all that stuff. So a mask is probably quite a good idea at the moment. So I'm going to show you how to make some really cute ones. So the fabric they recommend is cotton with a high thread count, so anything that is quite tightly woven. I think tea towel fabric was also on the list, but I will also try and find a few websites I can link below that are all about masks and all the different types, because there's a lot of different surgical masks. And obviously these are not surgical masks, just keep that in mind. So yeah, I'm gonna look through my fabrics now and see which ones I want to use and then start making. Pulled out a selection of fabrics that I think would work well for masks. I particularly like the black gingham. So I think I'm going to use that first to show you guys how I make them, and then I might make some more in these fabrics. Okay, so I've got my fabric, and then this is the pattern I've been using to make these face masks in. So you don't have to use a pattern, you can just measure it out on the fabric and cut it out, but I just think it's a lot easier. So for each mask you only need to cut out one. So that's that, and we can come on to that later. But next I'm going to make the straps. So I think I worked out I wanted the straps to be about 23 inches. So you'll need 4 straps. I'm going to measure up 23 inches, and then I'll just rip along there a little bit. Then next you can just rip it to get the seams, but I think I'm going to use my circular cutter just to be a bit more accurate. And I'm going to take 4cm strips. So this is all the fabric you need. So I'm going to start with the straps, and I'm going to make those by folding them in half, and I'm just going to stitch down here, leaving about 1 centimetre in. So to make your life a bit easier, it's better to just iron them in half first. So now I'm just going to go and sew down all of these, and then we can turn them through. Okay, now that you've sewn the strip, you then want to trim pretty close to the stitch line, but not too close. Also, if you don't want to do this step, you could just use some bias binding or just any straps that you guys have in your house, maybe some string or something. Then you want to turn your strap through. So all you have to do is take your strap and then, say about 1 centimetre down, cut a little slit into it, and then using a hairpin you just slot it into the top of the slit like that, and then you just push it down the whole pin inside. And this bit's a bit fiddly to get started, because you just want to basically turn it inside out on itself. Once it gets to the end, it is just so satisfying to pull out the strap. Ta-da! And then you have a strap and you can go and iron it flat and it looks so nice. So the next stage is to take your rectangle and you just want to fold it good sides together, and then on the open seam you want to stitch it closed, but you want to leave a little tiny gap, maybe about that big, open so that you can turn it all through. Okay, so I've just sewn down there and I've left a little gap here, and then you want to open it out and press it flat with this seam in the middle, and then you want to open up the seam here and just press it down. Okay, then you will need your straps, because this is where you're going to attach them. So you're basically going to attach one in each corner, but obviously on the inside. So I'm just going to place them in the corner and I might pin them down. And then you just want to make sure these are tucked inside so you don't sew them down at all. And then you want to do the same with the other side. So then you just need to stitch down here, and then we can turn it all inside out. Now that I've sewn down the sides, I can then find the little hole that we left earlier and basically pull everything through. That's what it looks like all pulled through, and then the little hole is just at the back, and that can be ironed down flat, and you don't need to worry about stitching that up really. So you just want to iron this flat in the front, and then an easy way to get the pleats is just to fold the mask in half. Give it a good press and then fold it in half again and press. And then when you open it back out, you should have creases that form where you need to put the pleats. It's also partly guesswork, but I feel like once you know what it looks like, it's quite easy to see where they should go. And then using pins again, just pin those into place. But then the last bit of sewing to do is just to stitch down here and hold the pleats into place. So there we go, that is one mask finished. Put it on and show you guys what it looks like, but the pleats basically mean it can go over your nose and under your chin. So that is that. Ta-da! So there we go, that is the finished mask, and then I've just tied it around at the back. I don't think it looks awful. I'm going to take it off, talk to you guys again. So just a little tip when you're tying a mask with straps, this is also really helpful for trainers and any shoes, is instead of doing just one turn over, do another turn, and then by the time you pull it, it won't slip and move, and then you can tie your bow. So yeah, it's just a handy little tip. So there we go, that is how I make my little face masks with ties. You can obviously use elastic if you want. It's a lot quicker to just use elastic or just some other ties that you don't make yourself, but I just think it's very satisfying to make these. Give it a go yourself if you want. I may be selling some, I don't know if I get around to making some more, so stay tuned to my Instagram if you are interested. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you all next week. Bye!
Now, should everyone wear a face mask? That's one of the big questions people all over the world are asking at the minute. This week, Singapore made wearing masks compulsory in public, and in the state of New York, they are also required whenever social distancing is not possible. But many countries are still advising people not to use them unless they are sick. Well, to help us understand the science behind this, I'm joined by Jeremy Howard, a scientist at the University of San Francisco and co-founder of the FAST.ai Research Institute. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. You've reviewed the research around face masks. What are the main things that you found?
Yes, I'm the lead author on the latest study here, which is a cross-disciplinary international review of the evidence around face masks from 19 of the top world experts in this area. And what we found is that the evidence is surprisingly clear. When we speak, we can transmit this disease by little droplets that come out of our mouth, so small that we can't see them. And any kind of simple cloth mask or paper towel mask actually stops them in their tracks, about 99% effective at stopping them. We looked at the data around this, and we saw that there's actually countries that have already figured out how to keep their economy going without mass destruction, like we're seeing in London and New York, mass death. For example, Taiwan and Hong Kong, their economies largely continuing as usual with just a few social distancing measures, but not a lockdown. And they only have 10 deaths each, despite Taiwan, for example, having a population of 30 million. They're doing the testing, the tracing, the quarantine of potentially infected, and face masks. There's a magic 4-piece solution, which we're already seeing working, and face masks are part of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned Taiwan and Hong Kong there. Why is there this divide between Asia and the West over this? Because countries that you mentioned, Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, masks have been the norm for quite a few years now.
Well, there's been an important change in East Asia. Masks have been the norm for people with symptoms. And unfortunately, that doesn't really help in this case, because we now know that about half of the infections come from people that don't have symptoms at the time that the infection happens. So what happened is in Taiwan and Hong Kong, they were pretty close to the, kind of the epicenter of this pandemic. They had people on the ground in Wuhan. They saw the asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spread. And so they very quickly realized, okay, everybody needs to wear a mask. They already had the mask wearing culture because they have, unfortunately, a history of respiratory pandemics in that region. So they know about the importance of masks. And with this vital new scientific fact, which is you can transmit the disease even if you don't know you have it, very quickly everybody realized we need everybody wearing masks. Otherwise, people are at risk.
And briefly, Jeremy, your advice then to anyone in a city with a significant coronavirus outbreak, as well as social distancing, would be simply to wear a mask.
Yes, and really any mask, you can literally take a piece of paper towel, you can staple a rubber band onto each end, and you can stick it over your face, and that is incredibly effective at stopping the droplets. It won't necessarily keep you safe from those around you, but it'll keep those around you safe from you. So if you make sure that everywhere you go, everybody's wearing a mask, that's going to do a great job of keeping you safe. So we really need help here from governments, from unions, and so London today, the London mayor is saying we want to enforce masks throughout our city, and this is why.
Jeremy Howard, really interesting to talk to you about that. That's Jeremy Howard live there from Houston in Texas. Thanks so much.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me. In today's video, I wanted to share a tutorial about how I made these DIY face masks. Please do keep in mind that this is not a replacement for personal protective equipment, although it is an alternative that we could use when we have to go outside our home. I do want to be clear that homemade fabric masks does not guarantee someone protection from becoming infected with COVID-19. So here are the materials that I'm using, and as for the pattern, I got this from Design Space, and if you don't have access to Design Space, you will find tons of free ones online. These masks are actually for my kids, so the size for my Sonic fabric is 11 by 7. And then for my red fabric, this is size at 10 by 6. And I have this kind of elastic, which I found it in the jewelry section. I know it's been difficult to find elastics around, but I've seen others use ribbons, hair ties, cut-up shirts, or any fabric to use to go around your head or your ears. I'm just going to trace the template on the fabric. Just going to cut the lining with my rotary tool, and if you are using one of these tools, just ensure to cut away from yourself. Please be very careful because these blades are extremely sharp. And then don't forget to close the blade for safety. This is what it looks like once you open the fabric up, and I have it wrong side up. Then I'm going to fold 1/4 of an inch on both sides, and I'm just going to use my fingers to make the crease. But if you have an iron or a Cricut mini press, please feel free to use them if you'd like. So now I'm going to take these to my machine and I'm going to sew them together. And here you go. I went ahead and stitched the sides. So I start from the top to the bottom. And as you can see, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it'll work just fine. Then fold the fabric in half and line it up. Then you can place a pin or a clip to secure placement. And you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch from the seam. So I'm back to show you where the fabric was sewn together. You can make snips and slits here with your scissors if you'd like, but I'm going to use my pinking shears to trim this part. I'm just going to open this part of the fabric and just press it with my fingers to keep it flat. Or if you prefer, you can use your iron or mini press to help you keep the fabric flat all the way down the fabric. Some sew a straight line on both sides of the center here. But what I will be doing is I'm just going to do a zigzag stitch instead. But do what is comfortable for you. So I'm going to bring this to my machine and I'll be right back. So this is what it looks like when you do a zigzag stitch. And it even shows better on the other side. Pocket filter where you can place a piece of filter of your choice or fabric. And that's it. Alright you guys, thank you for watching and stay safe.
Ha!